actually there is some minimal, still several $1 million negative impact caused to the foreign linkage country, but still the backward linkage negative impact to the backward linkage countries will be much larger than that for the foreign linkage the regional importing countries. So let me just wrap up. Let me just wrap up by presenting some main conclusions of this research. By analyzing the spillover effects through the input-output table analysis, we can draw some useful information about the potential impact of the higher tariff rate, not only direct impact but the indirect impact through the forward and backward linkages. And the higher tariffs do not only cause the direct impact to the trading partner, but also can have a significant indirect impact. In some cases, the indirect impact could be even higher than the direct impact caused to the direct trading partner. And it also depends, the effect also depends on the position of the industry or economy along the GVC segment. And when we consider the substitution effect across different importing sources, the negative forward effect could largely disappear, but still negative backward impact become more pronounced. In that sense, if the importing country, for example, between China and US, if US can have some alternative importing sources, it may have a freer hand to impose higher punitive tariff against the imports from China. Those are the main findings from this research. That's it for my presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, it seems that the discussions are getting more interesting, but time is limited. It seems that we live in a really interlinked world. Korean scholar working at Philippines. Now we have a Filipino scholar working in Uzbekistan. So please welcome Jose Thompson, who will present the impact of a rise in U.S. trade protectionism in East Asia. He's coming from Tashkent.
Thank you very much. First of all, this is a joint paper with Professor Chong sitting down there. And well, we have heard a lot about the rising protectionism in the U.S. and I would like to spend less of that. Let me just go to this very quickly. I think the major concern for many countries, especially in East Asia, is whether this rising protectionism will have an impact on these economies. So that's the motivation behind this study. And if you look at the literature, you'll find out that actually all studies have predicted that East Asia will suffer in terms of economic loss. In fact, even the United Nations, ESCAP, made a study based on survey among the experts and policy analysts found that their opinions are all about huge impact, negative impact on East Asia. So this is the motivation why we would like to investigate further. And it's quite interesting to see that actually, let me go straight to the results, give me the time constraint. So we're using the CGE model again, and I think we heard a lot about the usefulness and the validity of CGE, since it takes into account the spillover effects instead of just partial equilibrium approach. So we found that under the two scenarios, first we tried to verify whether an increase in import tariffs by the US, whether by 10%, this is an assumption that we got from existing literature. For example, the China International Corporation, for example, based in Hong Kong, made some kind of assumption that it should be between 10 to 15% if you allow for all the changes in the policy in the US towards protectionism. So we made that assumption of 10%. And the other scenario we look at is the impact of a BAT, border adjustment tax. And I think you heard about that. It's basically similar to import imposition, import tariff imposition of about 10% and a subsidy of about 10%. So under these two scenarios, we apply the dynamic CGE modeling, and these are the results. It's very interesting that from the results we found out that actually in all the scenarios we have done, the US came out to be a loser. And if you look at the results for the East Asian countries, you'll find that in the long term, especially in 2020 to 2030, they are not actually affected. In fact, their GDP would increase. That's very important finding. And the other finding is the belief that if China is going to be targeted specifically, right? We have heard a lot about the US complaining about the Chinese exports to the US, and if you would try to target China, what will be the impact on China and the rest of Asia, East Asia? And you'll find that, again, US will be affected, but in the case of the Republic of China, yes, it will be affected, but the rest of East Asia, they're not. So we discussed about this intra-Asian trade a while ago. Many studies have shown that, in fact, the production base in China actually is deepening. More and more exports actually are using domestic inputs in China. In fact, there was one study by Atokora, which is based in ANU, saying that, in fact, 70% of product composition in China actually comes from what they call producer-driven networks instead of buyer-driven networks. So that basically could be a reason why the East Asian countries are not sort of hurt as a result of Chinese imposition of imports on Chinese imports. Let's say we look at the position of a bat. This is again quite interesting. Now with the imposition of a bat, we have seen that actually US now this time is benefiting. GDP has gone up. And all the other East Asian countries, except of course, you can see, except for Japan and EU, they have actually benefited from that. And if you just target China alone for this bat, and you see here that many of these countries in East Asia would also be affected. So there is some kind of discrepancy here, right? Or in terms of imposition of just import tariffs, other East Asian countries will not be affected, but when it comes to BAT, they will be affected as well. So let me just summarize these findings for the benefit of anyway, you can read the paper since it's available. Using the increase, if you just assume there's an increase in using import tariffs by 10%, you can see that there will be an economic loss in the US under all scenarios. And if the increase in US import tariffs is applied to a specific country or a region, both the US and the surrounding country region would experience an economic loss. And one distinguishing feature from this is that the scale of the GDP loss for developing countries or regions is larger than for more advanced countries. An increase in US import tariffs for Chinese goods alone would not have any spillover effect on other East Asian countries. And then when it comes to the BAT imposition, and the position of a BAT for all countries and for all products would actually boost the US economic growth. Advanced economies are also expected to enjoy GDP increases, but China, Korea, and the ASEAN countries would face an economic loss in longer term period in 2031, although they would enjoy some positive growth in the short term. However, when the BAT is specifically targeted at certain East Asian country, US will suffer an economic loss with the exception of a BAT specifically targeted at the ASEAN countries. So this is the highlights or conclusion. There is a case to be made about increasing intra-Asian trade and investment which somehow shield East Asian countries from the rise in US trade protectionism. From the US economy, it is beneficial to adopt a BAT for all countries and across the board. But under this arrangement, there would be an economic loss for China, Korea, and the ASEAN countries in the longer term. any trade protectionism targeted at China alone, there would be no negative spillover effects on other East Asian countries, except under that when Japan and Korea would have economic loss. An increase in US trade protectionism would only push the East Asian countries towards deeper economic integration with serious implications for global pattern of trade and investment. And ASEAN countries will not experience any economic loss under all scenarios, except in the case of import tariffs, especially targeted for ASEAN countries. So that's it. I hope that I keep it within the time limit. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Actually, I would like to appreciate the very excellent contents of your presentation, as well as your efficient way of presenting your material. Thank you. You saved 1 minute. Last but not least, as everybody says, presenter is coming from my university, Kyunghee University. Professor Jeon Jong-gyu will present value-added trade intensity and business cycle synchronization. Please.
First, I have to say that thank you for having me here and giving me this opportunity to talk about my small idea about this trade intensity and then business cycle synchronization. Well, I realized that some papers given in this session already touch a little bit of issue of this global supply chains. And we know that in recent decades, the global supply chains have emerged and expanded a lot, and it changed the pattern and the nature of the international trade. And then also, it heavily influenced how different economies are related. So therefore, there are many, economic models and trade models that are trying to figure out, what's going on between a lot of different economies. But all those analyses and all those models are based on the idea that the models are supposed to generate some output, which are consistent with the value-added output or value-added value. However, when economists are trying to do something, trying to analyze the economy and trying to do whatever they want to do using the data, those data that they're using is gross trade data, especially in the field of international economics. So therefore, a lot of the models and theories are based on the idea of the value-added output, but the actual data they are using is gross trade data. But the problem is that the more expansion of global supply chain we have, there are more differences between the model and the data, because the value of trade data are becoming more and more different from what those trade data are trying to measure. So therefore, my idea is quite simple. There are many, theories and ideas about this in open economy, but one of the main topics that we could do using this trade data is how the different economies are related or correlated, and try to figure out, in order to try to figure out how the different economies are correlated, we try to measure how outputs are correlated for two different economies, and then try to figure out how the trade links are related with those correlations of output between different economies. So when we do that, we use the gross trade data. However, in reality, because of these expansions of global supply chains, there are bigger and bigger difference between value-added trade data and goods trade data. So therefore, a lot of analysis might have given us some different or some inaccurate result on how two different economies are related. So therefore, I'm going to skip this data part. So therefore, what I did was, we have this, well-known, simple equation to be estimated to find out how two different economies are related and how trade links or trade integration or trade relationships influence the correlation of the different economies. The Frankel laws estimated this simple equation. And over here, the variable PI is measured the trade intensity, which is calculated using gross trade data. And then there are many numerous studies trying to figure out how trade links and